My driveway kept getting smaller every month. It looked like the line was moving. I brought out my old house plans and measured. 3 feet were missing. I've lived in my New Jersey house for over 20 years. When I bought it, I made sure everything was documented properly. Property lines, easements, boundaries, all the legal stuff. I didn't want problems down the road. My driveway was clearly mine. My neighbor's fence was his, and the space between was a clear boundary. Simple, no problems. Until one day, I pulled into my driveway, and something felt wrong. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things. My driveway felt narrower. I wasn't sure why, but I had to park closer to my garage door than usual. It wasn't a big deal. Maybe I just parked weird that day. I let it go. Then it happened again and again. A few months passed, and every time I came home, it felt worse. I started second-guessing myself. Was I losing my mind? Had my driveway always been this tight? I asked my wife if she noticed anything. She looked at me like I was crazy. "You're just bad at parking," she said. Maybe she was right. I let it go. Until one morning, when I was pulling out, and my tire hit something. A hard edge that was completely new. I got out and looked. There was a fresh strip of pavement along the edge of my driveway, blending into mine like it had always been there, but it hadn't. I squatted down, running my hand over it. The asphalt was smoother than the rest of my driveway. It was fresh. I glanced over at my neighbor's driveway. That looked new, too. It clicked. I didn't know how. I didn't know when, but my neighbor had stolen part of my driveway. I didn't say anything yet. I wanted proof first. I went inside, dug through my old paperwork, and pulled out the house plans from when I bought the place. My property line was clearly marked. My driveway hadn't moved. Something else had. I grabbed a tape measure, walked outside, and measured. 3 feet. 3 full feet were gone. I stood there, tape measure in hand, staring at my own driveway like an idiot. My neighbor had stolen 3 feet of my property, and I hadn't even noticed until now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, going over every possibility. Had I made a mistake? Was there some kind of property shift I didn't know about? Had I signed something and forgotten? No, that wasn't possible. I needed proof. The next day, I went out and bought a small security camera. Nothing fancy, just something I could stick inside my garage window facing the driveway. If anything happened, I'd have it on video. And then I waited. A week passed. Nothing happened. I started to wonder if I'd been wrong. Maybe I really was just bad at parking. Then one night, I checked the footage, and I saw something that made my blood boil. At 2 a.m., my neighbor walked into my driveway. He looked around, making sure no one was watching. Then, a truck pulled up. A crew of guys got out, and right there in the dead of night, they started working on his driveway, but they weren't fixing it. They were expanding it onto mine. I watched in stunned silence as they ripped up the old boundary line, poured new asphalt 3 feet over onto my property, and painted fresh white lines like it had always been that way. They even sprayed a new border on my driveway like they owned it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Who does that? Who just takes land like that? I was furious, but I kept my cool. I needed to handle this the right way. If I confronted him, he'd deny it. If I waited too long, he'd act like it had always been his. I copied the footage onto a flash drive and went straight to the city's property department. When I got there, I explained what happened. The guy at the counter gave me a look, the kind people give when they think you're exaggerating. Then I pulled out the house plans. Then I showed him the footage. He watched in silence and he picked up the phone. Within hours, a city inspector was at my house. He measured everything, compared it to the official records, checked the footage, took a ton of pictures, and then he made some calls. By the afternoon, I had official confirmation. My neighbor was in serious violation of city codes. And the best part, his car was parked on my stolen property. The inspector made a call. Everything seemed handled until I got a call from the city. "We need to discuss your complaint." I went down there and the same inspector wouldn't look me in the eye. He said there was a misunderstanding and my neighbor's work was actually permitted. I showed him his own report from 2 days ago. He just shrugged. That's when I saw my neighbor in the parking lot, shaking hands with the city manager. I stood there in that parking lot, frozen. My neighbor, Vernon Haskell, caught my eye and smirked. Not a smile, a smirk. The kind that says, "I know exactly what I'm doing and there's nothing you can do about it." The city manager, a guy named Clifton Bray, turned and walked back into the building like nothing had happened. Vernon stood there for a second longer, staring at me, then got into his BMW and drove off. I walked back to my truck, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The inspector's sudden reversal made sense now. Vernon had connections. Real connections. The kind that made official reports disappear and violations turn into misunderstandings overnight. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to figure out my next move. Going back inside would be pointless. The city wasn't going to help me. Vernon had made sure of that. When I got home, my wife Rita was in the kitchen making dinner. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I told her everything. The inspector's reversal, Vernon shaking hands with the city manager, the whole corrupt mess. Rita's face went pale. She'd grown up in this town, knew how things worked. Small town politics, backroom deals, favors traded like currency. "So what do we do?" she asked. I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't letting Vernon Haskell steal my property and get away with it. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, running through options. I could hire a lawyer, but that would cost thousands, maybe tens of thousands, with no guarantee of winning against someone with city connections. I could go to the press, but our local paper was a joke, basically a PR machine for City Hall. I could try to take it to county level, but that would take months, maybe years. By then, Vernon would have solidified his claim. Adverse possession laws in New Jersey meant if he occupied my property long enough without challenge, he could legally claim it. I was running out of time. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office, 2 towns over. If the city was corrupt, maybe county records would tell a different story. I requested copies of all property records for my address and Vernon's address going back 30 years. The clerk, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain, gave me a curious look but processed my request. 3 hours later, I walked out with a thick stack of documents. I spread them across my kitchen table and started reading. Property deeds, tax records, easement agreements, building permits. Most of it was standard paperwork. Then I found something interesting. Vernon's house had been sold 6 times in the last 20 years. That was unusual for a residential property. I pulled up the sales records online and cross-referenced the dates. Every sale happened within months of a major city infrastructure project. New sewage lines, road widening, zoning changes, and every time, the property value spiked right before the sale. Vernon wasn't just stealing my driveway, he was running a pattern. I kept digging, searched public records for Clifton Bray, the city manager, found his financial disclosures, which by law had to be public. Nothing obviously criminal, but I noticed he owned rental properties all over town. Then, I cross-referenced those addresses with recent city projects. Every single one of his properties had benefited from zoning variances or infrastructure improvements in the last 5 years. Streets repaved right in front of his rentals, new streetlights installed, park improvements that increased nearby property values. I sat back and looked at what I'd found. It wasn't proof of anything illegal, not yet, but it was a pattern. Vernon and Clifton were both profiting from city decisions that just happened to benefit their properties. I needed more. Over the next week, I became obsessed. I went through every city council meeting record I could find online, watched old meeting videos on the city's YouTube channel, read through budget allocations and contract awards, and slowly, a picture emerged. Clifton Bray had been city manager for 8 years. During that time, he'd steered millions in city contracts to a handful of construction companies, always the same ones. I looked up the ownership records for those companies. Shell corporations, mostly, with ownership hidden behind LLC filings. But I kept digging, tracing corporate filings through the state database. And there it was. One of the construction companies, Ridgeline Paving, was partially owned by a trust. The trustee? Vernon Haskell's wife, Pamela. I had them. Not enough for a criminal case, probably, but enough to make noise. Enough to make them sweat. I made copies of everything, organized it into a folder with tabs and highlights. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called a friend of mine from high school who now worked as an investigative reporter for a paper in Newark. His name was Joel Pettigrew, and he'd won awards for exposing corruption in Essex County. Joel and I met at a diner halfway between our towns. I laid out everything I'd found. He listened, taking notes, asking questions. When I finished, he leaned back and whistled. "This is good," he said. "Real good. But I need more than public records. I need someone on the inside willing to talk." I didn't have that. Not yet. Joel said he'd start making calls, see what he could dig up on Clifton Bray and Vernon Haskell. In the meantime, he told me to keep documenting everything. Every interaction, every phone call, every piece of evidence. And he told me to be careful. People who profit from corruption don't like being exposed. I went home feeling like maybe, finally, I had a path forward. But that night, something happened that changed everything. I was in my garage around 10 p.m., organizing tools, when I heard voices outside. I cracked the side door and saw Vernon in his driveway, talking to 2 men I didn't recognize. They were standing by a white work van with no company logo. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Vernon was gesturing toward my house. One of the men nodded and wrote something in a notebook. Then they got in the van and drove off. Vernon stood there for a minute, looking at my house, then went inside. My stomach dropped. Were they planning something else? Another expansion? I checked my security camera footage. The camera had caught the van's license plate. I wrote it down, ran it through a free license plate lookup website. The van was registered to a property management company in Newark. I searched the company name. They specialized in commercial demolitions and lot clearing. Why would Vernon be talking to a demolition company? The next day, I got my answer. A letter arrived in my mail. Official city letterhead. Notice of eminent domain proceedings. The city was planning to acquire my property for a public works project, a new road expansion to ease traffic congestion. My house, along with 3 others on the block, was in the path of the proposed road. The letter said I'd be fairly compensated at market value and that I had 30 days to respond with any objections. I read it 3 times, not believing what I was seeing. There was no traffic congestion on our street. It was a quiet residential block. This was Vernon's next move. If he couldn't steal my driveway, he'd have the city take my entire property. I called Joel immediately, told him about the eminent domain notice. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "That's bold, even for corrupt officials. Eminent domain has to meet public necessity requirements. A road expansion that doesn't solve a real problem? That's legally shaky. But shaky didn't mean impossible. If Vernon and Clifton controlled the city council, they could push it through. Public hearings would be a formality. By the time anyone challenged it in court, my house could already be demolished. I needed to act fast. I started calling the other 3 homeowners who'd received notices. 2 of them were elderly couples who seemed scared and resigned to losing their homes. The third was a single mom named Darlene Kopp who was furious. "This is bullshit," she said when I called her. "There's no traffic problem here. My kid walks to school on this street every day. This is a scam." I told her what I'd found about Vernon and Clifton. She wanted in. We agreed to meet that evening. Darlene showed up at my house with a laptop and a determination I hadn't seen in anyone else. She was a paralegal, worked for a law firm in the city. She knew how to read legal documents and wasn't afraid of bureaucracy. We spent 3 hours going through everything I'd compiled. She made notes, asked questions, pointed out connections I'd missed. By the end of the night, we had a plan. We'd attend the next city council meeting and demand answers. We'd bring copies of everything I'd found and put it on public record. We'd force them to justify this eminent domain seizure in front of cameras and witnesses. The city council meeting was 2 weeks away. In the meantime, Joel published his first article. It was cautious, carefully worded to avoid libel, but it laid out the facts. City manager with properties that benefited from city projects. Contractor with family ties to city officials. A pattern of preferential treatment. The article ran in the Newark paper and got picked up by a few local news blogs. Nothing explosive, but enough to get attention. I started getting calls. Other residents who'd had problems with the city. Denied permits. Bogus code violations. One guy told me his fence was declared a safety hazard and torn down, only to have the same city contractor who demolished it offer to rebuild it for triple the normal cost. Another woman said her property taxes mysteriously doubled after she refused to sell her house to a developer with ties to Clifton Bray. All of these people had been fighting alone, isolated, thinking they were the only ones. Now they were starting to connect the dots. I created a Facebook group called Citizens for Accountable Government and invited everyone who'd contacted me. Within 3 days, we had 40 members. Within a week, over 100. People started sharing their stories, posting documents, comparing notes. We weren't just fighting Vernon Haskell anymore, we were exposing a systemic problem, the city noticed. A week before the council meeting, I got a visit from a city attorney named Garrett Munoz. He showed up at my door in a suit, carrying a briefcase, all smiles and professional courtesy. He said the city wanted to resolve this amicably. They were willing to withdraw the eminent domain proceedings and compensate me for the driveway encroachment. Cash settlement, no admission of wrongdoing, and I'd sign a non-disclosure agreement. I asked how much. He said $15,000. I told him no. Garrett's smile faded. He said I was making a mistake, that fighting the city would cost me more in legal fees than I'd ever recover, that I should think about my family, my future, my property value if this turned into a prolonged legal battle. I told him I'd see him at the city council meeting and closed the door in his face. Rita was worried. She'd supported me through everything, but now she was scared. $15,000 was real money. We could use it, and the city had resources we didn't. What if we lost everything? I understood her fear, but I couldn't let Vernon and Clifton win. This wasn't just about my driveway anymore. It was about every person they'd screwed over, every shady deal they'd made, every time they'd abused their power because they thought no one would challenge them. I told Rita I'd protect our family, but I wasn't backing down. The night before the city council meeting, I couldn't sleep. I went over my notes for the 100th time, making sure I had everything organized. Darlene had helped me prepare a presentation, 5 minutes of facts and evidence that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. Joel was going to be there with a photographer. We'd invited every member of our Facebook group to attend. I had no idea how many would actually show up. At 6 p.m. the next day, Rita and I drove to City Hall. The council chambers were on the second floor, a wood-paneled room with rows of seats for the public and a raised platform for the council members. When we walked in, I stopped in the doorway. The room was packed. Every seat was filled, people standing along the walls, more crowding in the hallway outside. I recognized faces from the Facebook group, neighbors from surrounding streets, people I'd never met who'd heard about what was happening and decided to show up. Darlene was near the front, saving 2 seats for us. She grinned when she saw my face. "Told you people were pissed," she said. The city council members filed in at 7 p.m., 5 of them, all looking uncomfortable at the size of the crowd. Clifton Bray sat off to the side, supposedly there in an advisory capacity. He avoided eye contact with everyone. The council president, an older man named Eugene Marsh, called the meeting to order. He tried to move through the agenda quickly, approving minutes and budget items, clearly hoping to get through the meeting without addressing the elephant in the room. But when they reached the public comments section, hands shot up all over the room. Eugene couldn't ignore it. He called on the first speaker, a woman named Phyllis who'd been fighting a property dispute with the city for 2 years. She spoke for 3 minutes, laying out how her fence had been torn down without proper notice. Then another speaker, then another. Each one detailed a different abuse of power, a different shady dealing, a different example of corruption. Eugene kept trying to cut people off, saying they were off topic, but the crowd wouldn't let him. People started shouting, demanding answers. The whole room was buzzing with anger. Finally, Eugene called on me. I walked to the podium, set down my folder, and looked directly at Clifton Bray. Then I started talking. I laid out everything. The stolen driveway, the midnight paving crew, the inspector's reversal after Vernon met with Clifton, the eminent domain notice that made no sense, Vernon's ownership stake in Ridgeline Paving, the same company that got city contracts, Clifton's properties that benefited from convenient city projects, the pattern of corruption that had been happening for years. I spoke for exactly 5 minutes, citing dates, documents, dollar amounts. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Eugene tried to respond, saying these were serious allegations that would be investigated, but his words were drowned out by the crowd. Someone yelled, "Resign!" Others picked it up. "Resign! Resign!" The chant filled the room. Clifton Bray stood up and walked out, face red. 2 of the council members followed him. The meeting descended into chaos. Eugene tried to adjourn, but no one was leaving. People were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding accountability. Joel's photographer was capturing everything. The local cable access channel was recording. This was going to be everywhere. The next morning, Joel's second article ran. This time, he held nothing back. He'd found more dirt on Clifton, including a suspicious property sale where Clifton had bought a commercial lot for $50,000 and sold it 6 months later for $300,000 after the city rezoned it for high-density development. He'd also traced campaign contributions from Ridgeline Paving to 3 of the 5 city council members. The article included photos from the council meeting, showing the packed room and the chanting crowd. It painted a picture of a town rising up against corrupt leadership. By noon, the story had been picked up by the Associated Press. By evening, it was on the front page of the Star-Ledger. News vans started showing up in town. Reporters knocked on my door. I gave interviews, showed them my evidence, walked them through the timeline. Vernon Haskell refused to comment. Clifton Bray released a statement through a lawyer, denying any wrongdoing and calling the allegations a coordinated smear campaign. But the damage was done. Public pressure was mounting. The state attorney general's office announced they were opening an investigation into city contracting practices. The county prosecutor said they were reviewing the eminent domain proceedings for potential abuse of power. And 3 of the 5 city council members announced they wouldn't seek re-election. They didn't say why, but everyone knew. They were trying to get out before the investigations reached them. Vernon Haskell's house went up for sale 2 weeks later. He listed it at a price well below market value, clearly desperate to sell fast and get out of town. I watched from my driveway as the realtor hammered in the for sale sign. Vernon didn't even look at me. He just got in his BMW and drove off. I never saw him again. The city sent me a formal letter withdrawing the eminent domain proceedings. No explanation, no apology, just a terse notice that the road expansion project had been canceled due to budgetary concerns. My driveway was still 3 feet short, but I wasn't done fighting. I filed a civil lawsuit against Vernon Haskell for property theft and against the city for enabling it. Darlene connected me with her firm, and they took the case on contingency. It took 8 months, but eventually, we settled. Vernon's insurance paid to restore my property line, repave my entire driveway, and compensate me for the loss of use. The city, facing mounting legal bills and bad publicity, agreed to pay my legal fees and issue a formal apology. Clifton Bray resigned under pressure 3 months after the council meeting. The state investigation found enough evidence of misconduct to refer the case to federal authorities for potential fraud charges. Last I heard, he was facing multiple lawsuits and had declared bankruptcy. The city hired a new manager, a woman from outside the county with a reputation for transparency and reform. She instituted new policies requiring public disclosure of all city contracts and mandatory recusal for any official with financial conflicts of interest. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Our Facebook group evolved into an official watchdog organization. We started attending every council meeting, reviewing every budget, questioning every contract. The local paper, embarrassed by their failure to cover the corruption, started doing real investigative journalism, and the culture shifted. People were paying attention now. Vernon's house sold eventually, to a young couple with no ties to city politics. They seemed nice. I helped them move in, told them the history of the property, warned them to always document everything and never assume the city had their best interests at heart. They thanked me and said they'd heard about what happened, and that's actually why they bought the house. They wanted to live in a community where people stood up for what was right. I think about that sometimes. How close I came to just accepting Vernon's theft. How easy it would have been to take the city's settlement and sign the NDA and move on. How many other people had probably done exactly that over the years, letting corruption slide because fighting seemed too hard. But I didn't, and it made a difference. My driveway is mine again. Vernon is gone. Clifton is disgraced. And my town is better for it. Not perfect, but better. Sometimes that's enough. Update 1. So it's been about 6 months since my last post, and a lot of people have been messaging me asking for an update. Fair warning, this gets messy. Remember how I said Vernon Haskell's house sold to that nice young couple? Well, that transaction turned into a legal nightmare, and I got dragged into it. About 2 months after they moved in, the husband, his name was Flynn, knocked on my door. He looked stressed, said they'd been having issues with the house. Not just normal old house issues, serious structural problems. Cracks in the foundation, water damage in the basement, electrical wiring that wasn't up to code. They'd hired an inspector before buying, but somehow all of this had been missed or hidden. Flynn asked if I knew anything about Vernon's renovations or repairs. I told him about the midnight paving crew, but I didn't know anything about work inside Vernon's house. Flynn nodded, said he was going to talk to a lawyer. That should have been the end of my involvement, but it wasn't. 3 weeks later, I got served with a subpoena. Flynn and his wife were suing Vernon for fraud and non-disclosure of known defects. Their lawyer wanted to depose me as a witness to Vernon's character and pattern of behavior. I wasn't thrilled about getting involved in more legal drama, but I didn't have a choice. The deposition was scheduled for a Thursday morning at a law office in Newark. I showed up, got sworn in, and spent 2 hours answering questions about everything I knew about Vernon. The driveway theft, the midnight crew, his connections to Clifton Bray, the shell companies, all of it. Flynn's lawyer was sharp, a woman named Octavia Ruiz who clearly knew how to build a case. She asked me if I thought Vernon was capable of deliberately hiding structural problems to make a sale. I said based on his willingness to literally steal land, yeah, I thought he was capable of just about anything. That deposition ended up being more useful than anyone expected. Octavia found building permits that Vernon had pulled for foundation work 5 years ago but never completed. The permits had been closed out as finished, signed off by a city inspector who, surprise, was friends with Clifton Bray. But Octavia hired a structural engineer who determined the work had definitely not been done properly. There were support beams that were supposed to be replaced that weren't. Waterproofing that was supposed to be installed that wasn't. The whole foundation was a ticking time bomb. Flynn and his wife were looking at $80,000 in repairs just to make the house safe. Vernon's defense was predictable. He claimed he didn't know about any problems, said he'd hired licensed contractors and assumed the work was done correctly, said Flynn's inspector should have caught any issues. But Octavia had documentation showing Vernon had received multiple quotes for foundation repairs in the year before he sold the house. He knew. He just chose not to fix it. The case went to trial. I had to testify. It was surreal. Sitting in a courtroom, raising my right hand, swearing to tell the truth while Vernon sat 20 feet away glaring at me. I repeated everything I'd said in the deposition, added details about how Vernon had tried to intimidate me after the city council meeting, how he'd sent his lawyer to my house with threats. Octavia asked if I believed Vernon was honest. I said no. The jury sided with Flynn, awarded him $120,000 in damages, enough to cover the repairs and then some. Vernon's lawyer filed an appeal, but it went nowhere. Vernon ended up declaring bankruptcy. His house in Florida, because of course he'd moved to Florida, got foreclosed on. His wife divorced him. Last I heard, he was living with his brother in Tennessee, working some kind of sales job. Karma's funny like that. But that's not even the craziest part. While Vernon's trial was happening, the federal investigation into Clifton Bray was wrapping up. The feds had been digging deep, and they'd found evidence of wire fraud, tax evasion, and bribery. Clifton had been taking kickbacks from contractors for years, funneling money through shell companies and offshore accounts. The indictment came down in July. 12 counts, including conspiracy to defraud the government. Clifton's trial is scheduled for next spring, but his lawyer is already trying to negotiate a plea deal. Word is Clifton might flip on other people involved in the scheme. There's talk that some state legislators might be implicated. Meanwhile, our little watchdog group has become a bigger deal than I ever expected. We've expanded beyond just monitoring city council meetings. We're now tracking county and state issues, filing open records requests, publishing reports on government spending. We've got over 1,000 members now, including lawyers, accountants, journalists, and regular citizens who just want transparency. We've successfully challenged 3 questionable contracts, exposed 2 cases of nepotism in city hiring, and pushed for reforms that are actually being implemented. It's exhausting, honestly. I never wanted to become a community activist. I just wanted my driveway back. But here we are. Rita's been supportive, though she keeps joking that I've turned into the neighborhood watchdog that everyone either loves or finds annoying. She's probably right. Some people appreciate what we're doing. Others think we're making mountains out of molehills. There's a guy on the city council now. His name is Preston Vale, who clearly hates our group. He calls us gadflies and says we're wasting taxpayer money with frivolous records requests. But every time he complains, more people join our group. Streisand effect in action. The most unexpected thing that came out of all this? I got recruited to run for city council. No joke. A bunch of people from the watchdog group approached me last month and said I should run in the next election. They'd already started gathering petition signatures. I laughed at first. Then I realized they were serious. I told them I'd think about it. I haven't decided yet. Part of me is tempted. I know the issues now. I know where the problems are. And I know I could make a difference. But another part of me remembers how exhausting the last year has been and wonders if I really want to sign up for more of this. Rita says it's my decision, but she's also pointed out that if I run and win, I'll basically be married to City Hall for the next 4 years. She's not wrong. The election is still 6 months away. I've got time to decide. In the meantime, I'm just trying to get back to normal life. My driveway looks great. Property values on our street have actually gone up because the new city manager has been making real improvements to infrastructure and services. Vernon's old house is fixed up now, and Flynn and his wife have turned it into a showcase. They even planted a garden in the front yard. Sometimes I look at Vernon's old place and think about how different things could have turned out if I'd just accepted his theft. If I'd taken the city's hush money. If I'd stayed quiet. That house would still be falling apart. Clifton would still be stealing. Vernon would still be getting away with it. I guess that's why I'm leaning toward running for council, because someone has to give a damn. Update 2. Alright, so I ran for city council. And I won. This is going to be long because the last 8 months have been absolutely insane. First, the campaign. I announced my candidacy in January. The local paper did a profile on me, played up the whole citizen takes on corruption angle. Within a week, I had volunteers, donations, and more attention than I knew what to do with. Our watchdog group became my unofficial campaign team. Darlene handled all the legal paperwork and compliance filings. Joel, the reporter, helped with messaging and press releases. Rita managed my schedule and made sure I didn't completely lose my mind. We ran a grassroots campaign. No big donors, no PAC money, just small contributions from residents who wanted change. My opponent was Preston Vale, the council member who'd been calling us gadflies for the past year. He had name recognition and support from the old guard, business owners who liked the way things used to be run. But he also had baggage. Preston had voted to approve every single one of Clifton Bray's shady contracts. He'd been on the council during the worst of the corruption, and our group had documented all of it. We ran on transparency and accountability. Preston ran on experience and stability. The debates were brutal. Preston tried to paint me as a troublemaker with no government experience who'd waste time with witch hunts instead of focusing on real issues. I pointed out that the real issues were the corruption he'd enabled. We went back and forth like that for weeks. Election day was in May. I spent the whole day knocking on doors, reminding people to vote. Rita and I didn't get home until the polls closed at 8 p.m. The results came in around 10. I won with 58% of the vote. Preston conceded graciously, which surprised me. He called my cell phone, congratulated me, Said he hoped I'd prove him wrong about being a troublemaker. I thanked him and hung up. Rita opened a bottle of wine. We sat on the back porch and just breathed for the first time in months. I got sworn in at the next council meeting. 5 of us on the council now, including 2 other new members who'd run on reform platforms. The old guard was officially outnumbered. The city manager, the new one who'd replaced Clifton, seemed relieved. She'd been trying to clean things up but kept getting blocked by Preston and his allies. Now she had support. We got to work immediately. First order of business was reviewing all existing city contracts. We found 3 that had been awarded without proper competitive bidding. We canceled them and put them out for new bids. The companies that lost those contracts were pissed, threatened to sue, but their threats went nowhere because they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Next, we implemented a new ethics policy requiring financial disclosure from all council members and department heads. Anyone with a potential conflict of interest had to recuse themselves from relevant votes. Sounds obvious, right? But it had never been codified before. Preston and his allies had operated on a gentleman's agreement system that wasn't actually binding. We also created a public portal where residents could track city spending in real time. Every contract, every purchase order, every payment, all posted online for anyone to see. Transparency matters. If people know what their government is doing with their money, corruption becomes harder to hide. That portal went live in August, and within a week, residents started asking questions. Why was the city paying $3,000 for a lawnmower when the same model cost $1,200 at Home Depot? Why was the police department ordering 50 new laptops when they'd just ordered 40 last year? Valid questions that led to real answers. Turned out the lawnmower was actually an industrial-grade riding mower for the Parks Department, which made the cost reasonable. But the laptops? That was actually wasteful spending. We dug into it and found the police chief had been over-ordering equipment to pad his department's budget. We implemented new purchasing controls. But while all this government reform was happening, something else was going on that would make everything else seem simple. Vernon Haskell came back to town. I found out when I got a call from Flynn, the guy who'd bought Vernon's old house. He was panicked. Said Vernon had shown up at his door claiming he had a legal right to reclaim the property. Flynn had told him to leave, threatened to call the cops, but Vernon wouldn't go. He just stood on the front lawn shouting about fraud and stolen assets. I drove over there. Sure enough, Vernon was still there, pacing in front of the house, on his phone. When he saw me pull up, his face twisted into something between rage and satisfaction. "You," he said, pointing at me. "This is your fault." I got out of my truck, made sure to keep my distance. Flynn was standing in his doorway, phone in hand, ready to call 911. I asked Vernon what he was doing here. He said he'd filed a lawsuit to reverse the sale of his house. Claimed he'd been coerced into selling under duress because of the public smear campaign against him. He said the bankruptcy court had no right to force the sale and that he wanted his property back. I told him that sounded like something he should take up with his lawyer, not Flynn. Vernon got in my face, called me every name in the book, said I'd destroyed his life, cost him his marriage, his home, his reputation. I just stood there and took it, because he was right. I had destroyed his life, and I'd do it again. Flynn called the police. 2 officers showed up within minutes. They told Vernon he was trespassing and needed to leave. Vernon argued, said he was the rightful owner, but the cops didn't care. They escorted him off the property and told him if he came back, they'd arrest him. As Vernon was being walked to his car, he shouted at me, "This isn't over. I'm going to make you pay for what you did." I watched him drive away, then turned to Flynn. Asked if he was okay. He nodded, but he looked shaken. Said he couldn't believe Vernon had the nerve to show up like that. I told him to document everything, keep his doors locked, maybe install some security cameras. Vernon was desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. I went home and told Rita what happened. She was worried, said maybe we should get our own security cameras just in case. I agreed. We had them installed the next day. 2 weeks later, Vernon made good on his threat. He filed a lawsuit against me personally, not against the city, not against the watchdog group, against me. Claimed I'd engaged in a malicious campaign to defame him, interfere with his property rights, and cause intentional emotional distress. He was seeking $500,000 in damages. I read the complaint and almost laughed. It was absurd. Every single thing I'd said about Vernon was either documented fact or protected opinion. He'd literally stolen my property. He'd been caught on camera. The city had confirmed his violation. But absurd or not, a lawsuit is a lawsuit. I needed a lawyer. Darlene connected me with a guy from her firm who specialized in anti-SLAPP litigation. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. It's when someone sues you not because they think they'll win, but to intimidate you into shutting up. New Jersey has strong anti-SLAPP laws designed to protect people like me. My lawyer, his name was Tobias Lund, filed a motion to dismiss under the anti-SLAPP statute. He argued that everything I'd done was protected speech related to a matter of public concern. He submitted all my evidence showing Vernon's corruption, his theft, his fraud. He argued that Vernon's lawsuit was frivolous and filed in bad faith. The hearing was set for October. In the meantime, Vernon escalated. He started showing up at city council meetings, sitting in the front row, staring at me the entire time. He never spoke during public comment, just sat there, silent and menacing. It was creepy as hell. He also started a blog, called it The Truth About Corruption in New Jersey, or something equally dramatic. He posted long, rambling essays about how he was the real victim, how I was a vindictive liar who'd manipulated the media and the courts. He claimed Clifton Bray had been framed, that the federal charges were politically motivated, that the whole investigation was a witch hunt. Nobody took him seriously except for a handful of conspiracy theorists who started commenting on his posts. But it was still unsettling. Vernon was obsessed, and obsessed people don't just give up. The hearing for his lawsuit finally came. Tobias presented our case. Vernon's lawyer, some guy who'd clearly been hired on the cheap, tried to argue that I'd acted with malice. Tobias destroyed him, cited case law, submitted documentation, walked the judge through every single thing I'd done and why it was protected. The judge didn't even take a recess to deliberate. He dismissed Vernon's lawsuit from the bench, ruled it was a textbook SLAPP suit, and ordered Vernon to pay my legal fees. Vernon lost it, started yelling at the judge, called him corrupt, said the whole system was rigged. The bailiff had to escort him out of the courtroom. After the hearing, Tobias told me Vernon could still appeal, but it wouldn't go anywhere. The ruling was solid. He also said I could countersue Vernon for abuse of process, but it wouldn't be worth it. Vernon was bankrupt. Even if I won, I'd never collect. I decided to let it go. Vernon was a broken man, and kicking him while he was down wasn't going to accomplish anything. But Vernon didn't let it go. 2 weeks after the hearing, I got a call from Joel. He said Vernon had been arrested, not for anything related to me, but for threatening a federal witness. Turned out Vernon had contacted one of the contractors who was testifying against Clifton Bray, sent him emails saying he'd better reconsider his testimony or there would be consequences. The contractor reported it to the FBI, and they traced the emails back to Vernon. He was charged with witness tampering. That's a federal crime with serious prison time. Vernon's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea, but the prosecution wasn't interested. They wanted to make an example out of him. The trial was fast. Vernon represented himself after his lawyer quit. Bad move. He gave rambling testimony about how everyone was out to get him, how the system was corrupt, how he was being persecuted for knowing the truth. The jury convicted him in less than 2 hours. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the sentencing, but Joel did. He said Vernon didn't react when the judge handed down the sentence. Just sat there, staring straight ahead. Like he'd finally accepted that it was over. So that's where things stand now. Vernon's in prison. Clifton's trial is still pending, but his plea deal is looking more likely. Flynn and his wife are happy in their house, which is fully repaired and beautiful. And me? I'm still on city council, still running the watchdog group, still pushing for transparency and accountability. It's exhausting, it's frustrating, but it matters. Someone has to give a damn. Update 3. It's been a year since Vernon went to prison, and I honestly thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. This update is going to be the longest one yet, because what happened in the last 12 months was beyond anything I could have predicted. It started with Clifton Bray's plea deal. In March, Clifton finally agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. He pled guilty to wire fraud and bribery, and agreed to testify against other people involved in the corruption scheme. And when I say other people, I mean people way higher up the chain than anyone expected. Clifton's testimony implicated 2 state legislators, a county executive, and 3 other city managers from neighboring towns. The whole thing was a network, not just isolated incidents. These people had been running the same playbook for years: award contracts to shell companies, take kickbacks, use their positions to enrich themselves while taxpayers footed the bill. The federal investigation expanded, more indictments came down, more trials got scheduled. Our little town became ground zero for one of the biggest public corruption cases in New Jersey history. The media attention was insane. National news outlets started covering the story. I did interviews with NPR, the New York Times, even CNN. They wanted the citizen activist angle, the regular guy who stood up to corruption and started a domino effect. It was surreal. But with all that attention came scrutiny. People started digging into my background, looking for skeletons. They didn't find any because I don't have any, but it was still uncomfortable. Random bloggers accused me of being a political plant. claimed I was secretly funded by some shadowy organization. None of it was true, but conspiracy theories don't need truth to spread. The watchdog group had to hire a PR person just to manage the misinformation. And then Vernon's family got involved. His brother, Lyle, started making noise. He lived in Tennessee, hadn't been part of any of the corruption, but he was furious about Vernon's imprisonment. Lyle started a GoFundMe to raise money for Vernon's legal appeals. He gave interviews to right-wing podcasts, framing Vernon as a victim of government overreach and cancel culture. He claimed Vernon had been railroaded by activist judges and a biased media. The GoFundMe raised about $3,000, which wasn't going to pay for much legal representation, but it gave Lyle a platform. He started showing up at city council meetings, just like Vernon used to, sitting in the front row, recording everything on his phone, asking hostile questions during public comment. The first time Lyle spoke, he accused me of personally orchestrating his brother's downfall out of spite. He said I'd weaponized the legal system to destroy a man's life over a property dispute. He demanded I apologize and resign from the council. I didn't respond during the meeting. Our council policy is not to engage with personal attacks. But afterward, I pulled Lyle aside and told him if he had issues with Vernon's case, he should take it up with federal prosecutors, not me. Lyle got in my face, said I was a coward hiding behind bureaucracy. Security had to step in and escort him out. That became a pattern. Lyle would show up, make accusations, get escorted out. It was disruptive, but not illegal. Free speech and all that. Then things escalated. In June, someone vandalized my house. Spray-painted corrupt across my garage door in red paint. Smashed my mailbox. Slashed 2 of my tires. I called the police, filed a report. They dusted for prints, checked nearby security cameras, but didn't find anything useful. The officer who took my statement said it was probably teenagers, random vandalism, but I knew better. This was targeted. Rita was shaken. She'd been supportive through everything, but having our home attacked crossed a line. She wanted to move, said this wasn't worth it, said we'd done enough. I understood her fear, but moving felt like giving up. We compromised, upgraded our security system, installed more cameras, added motion sensor lights all around the property, and I kept going to council meetings. The vandalism happened 2 more times over the next month. Once, someone threw a brick through our front window with a note attached that said, "You're next." Another time, they dumped garbage all over our lawn. The police still couldn't catch whoever was doing it. No witnesses, no clear evidence. I started to wonder if Lyle was involved, but I had no proof. Then, in August, something happened that changed everything. A woman named Simone Drucker reached out to me. She said she was Vernon's ex-wife, Pamela's sister, and she had information I needed to hear. We met at a coffee shop in the next town over. Simone was nervous, kept looking around like she thought someone was watching. She told me Pamela and Lyle had been in contact with Vernon in prison and were planning something. She didn't know exactly what, but she'd overheard phone conversations about getting revenge, making me pay, setting things right. Simone said she wanted no part of it. She'd cut ties with Pamela after the divorce, didn't approve of what Vernon had done, and thought the whole family had lost their minds. But she felt guilty staying silent when she knew they were plotting something. I thanked Simone and immediately contacted my lawyer, Tobias. He advised me to inform the police and maybe get a restraining order against Lyle. I did both. The police said they'd increase patrols around my neighborhood. The restraining order was approved, barring Lyle from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. That didn't stop him. A week later, Lyle showed up at my workplace. I'm a contractor, run my own small business doing home renovations. I was at a job site, framing a new addition, when Lyle pulled up in a truck. He got out, holding his phone like he was recording, and started shouting at me in front of my crew and the homeowners. Called me a liar, a fraud, said I'd destroyed an innocent man's life. The homeowners were horrified. My crew didn't know what to do. I stayed calm, told Lyle he was violating a restraining order and needed to leave. He refused, said restraining orders were unconstitutional. One of my guys called the cops. Lyle kept ranting until the police arrived. They arrested him for violating the restraining order. He was held overnight and arraigned the next morning. The judge set bail at $5,000, which Lyle posted, and released him with a stern warning. If he violated the order again, he'd go to jail for 30 days. Lyle went quiet after that. No more council meetings, no more social media posts. I thought maybe he'd finally given up. I was wrong. In October, I got a call from the FBI. An agent named Renata Cross wanted to meet with me. She said it was urgent. We met at a federal building in Newark. Renata told me they'd been monitoring communications between Vernon, Pamela, and Lyle. Apparently, Vernon had been using a contraband cell phone in prison to coordinate with his family. They were planning something big. The FBI had intercepted messages discussing a plan to discredit me publicly. They were going to fabricate evidence that I'd taken bribes from contractors, create fake documents showing I'd benefited financially from the city contracts I'd supposedly exposed. They were going to leak it all to the media, try to destroy my reputation the way I destroyed Vernon's. Renata said the FBI had enough evidence to charge all three of them with conspiracy and obstruction of justice, but she wanted my cooperation. She wanted me to act like I didn't know about the plan, let them move forward so the FBI could catch them in the act. I agreed. For the next 3 weeks, I went about my life normally, attended council meetings, worked on job sites, posted on social media like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, the FBI was watching. In early November, Pamela and Lyle made their move. They contacted a local blogger known for publishing conspiracy theories and leaked their fabricated documents. The blogger posted a long article accusing me of corruption, using fake invoices and doctored emails as evidence. The story got picked up by a few fringe websites. Some people believed it, most didn't. But it didn't matter because the FBI was already moving. The next day, agents arrested Pamela and Lyle, charged them with wire fraud, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and making false statements. Vernon was hit with additional charges for using a contraband phone and participating in the scheme from prison. The blogger who published the story wasn't charged, but the FBI made it clear he'd been duped. He took down the article and issued a retraction. The whole plan fell apart in less than 48 hours. Pamela and Lyle both took plea deals. Pamela got 2 years probation and a fine. Lyle got 6 months in federal prison. Vernon's sentence was extended by another year. And me? I testified at their sentencing hearings. Told the judge how their harassment had affected my family, how Rita had been scared to stay in our own home, how I'd had to install security cameras and look over my shoulder everywhere I went. The judge was sympathetic, said their actions were reprehensible, and that they'd abused the legal system to pursue a personal vendetta. After the sentencing, Simone reached out again, thanked me for handling it the way I did, said she hoped her family would finally let it go. I told her I hoped so too, but I wasn't holding my breath. It's been 2 months since then. Things have mostly returned to normal. The vandalism stopped. The harassment stopped. Vernon's in prison until 2028. Pamela and Lyle are out of my life.